So we were just looking at the list from your colleagues about the best quarterback wide receiver tandems. And
Nationally.
yeah, nationally.
One guy's opinion.
Right. Look at me. Set the record straight, BC. This wasn't some group think. You're not on board with that.
You weren't
I get
a collaborator here.
Well, I'll just I always say that to people because sometimes you're attached, it's your outlet, but everybody's got somebody elsewhere outside the bubble, and that's fine. That has their own take on things, and you never know what their biases are or whatever. But I was listening. I saw that Dylan and Dane weren't in the top 10 of QB receiver combos,
which is okay. That
was okay if you don't include some of the other people.
That wasn't my takeaway. Like, this isn't like me championing Nebraska. Although two things, and I was just having a sidebar conversation with my colleague, and even she was like, "How can Holgorsen not get more of the benefit of the doubt?" But she's also the same person that would probably say the same thing about Lincoln Riley, right? So
that's fair.
That's fair, and it'll be. I'll be curious to see where you put him if he makes it with. On the list, because we're going to do this for Friday and come up with kind of our own. But two things, BC. I left, not that it's the end all be all, but let's say he's 100% spot on. It's guardrails. It just gives me boundaries in which to think, right? My big takeaway was I further believe this college football season is wide open.
Yep.
Like I get the Penn State, Ohio State. I don't even put Oregon in that discussion, although they get lumped in. I'll give you Texas, right? They've got an NFL player on all three levels defensively. Going to be really good skill-wise. They have a budding star potentially at quarterback. I'll even give you Texas, but even they come with questions. Georgia comes with questions. I mean, in Stockton, do you trust, right? So I just left. I'm like, this thing is wide open. If Lagway and Eugene Wilson III make that list, I'll take my chances with D2, like Dylan and Dana, right? I just will.
Yeah.
And I think actually 3D. Let's just call him 3D. Dylan, Dana, Dane. Dana Dane. That used to be a rapper. Dana Dane. That's my 80s, 90s baby coming out.
Don't you think, like most years in college football, I've always lived under the premise that there is that top 5 or 6, and then teams like 7 through 35 are kind of in a blender, and there's very little separating them. And to your point, I don't even know that there's that top 6 and then the blender this year. I think it's like maybe there's 1 or 2 you'd say, okay, they're a little bit ahead of the crowd. But I think there's basically 30 to 35 you can mix up just for the reasons you're saying, because if you look around the rosters, there's a lot of potential that excites when you could be talked into like what we're talking about here, like a QB wide receiver combo and what that can look like. But there's not a lot that's proven at places. And to your point, Dylan and Dane Key probably have as much of a chance to maximize as the people on that list. And then when you
I mean, as much as Arch Manning and Ryan Wingo, right?
Well, I mean, and this not to get away from our guy who made the list, but like I think Klatt did a 20, his best quarterbacks. I think he had Manning at the top, right? And I don't know.
I think he was 2.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with that, but I'm just saying, like, Dylan could be as much in that conversation as Manning, I think, or Lagway for sure. And so that's why this season is all kinds of fascinating. And I think one of the big points you're getting to, and I think we talked about this one of the previous weeks, is I do think people outside of our area are sleeping on Dana Holgorsen, the Dana Holgorsen potential factor, and just a full runway into a season and what that can look like as they've worked through things together. Maybe it's because they view this as like year 2 of him here because he was here at the end, and they kind of forget that he only came in and was figuring out a new language with only 3 games to go. And so
I think it's because it's Nebraska.
Could be. It's sort of like has happened with the draft and stuff like this. And for fair reason, Nebraska's lost the benefit of the doubt. And there's some people who really want Nebraska, I think, that don't live here to be good again. They're all for it. but they've maybe predicted 2 or 3 years ago during the Frost era or something like, yeah, they're going to bust out this year. They got burned by it. And so now they're cautious to do it. And so when you see some lists like this, they're like, yeah, I'm not going to touch them. Well, they can go do it first. And then next year, if they produce, I'll put them fourth on this list in June.
Yeah, I mean, they can sleep on them at their own peril. That's fine.
Wooden nickel.
Can I just say, though,
I never would thought you would be part of the Homer network. This is incredible.
It's not even, for me, it's not even a Homer thing so much as the lack of consistent logic applied.
Yeah, I know that.
Like,
across the board with everything that drives you crazy.
Like, if you can't apply the same logic to Nebraska that you do to Texas, and like, listen, I'll even give it Texas because like, they went to the playoff last year. They were really good. We still don't know anything about Arch Manning, really.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we really don't. Okay. We don't know anything about DJ Lagway, really. Like, there's a ton of these guys that are making these lists that we don't actually know anything about. And we're making these wild assumptions. And that's fine if you want to make the wild assumptions. But if you're going to do that for everybody else, and I'm kind of in the process of trying to count this up live while we're doing this, but if you're going to make that, and not just with Dylan, right? Because I'm trying to figure out on these.
Aller and Pena?
No, I'm trying to figure out with all these receivers, right? I think both Dane Key and Hunter have better receiving numbers than like 6 guys that made the list as receivers. So I'm trying to figure out, I was like, okay, they have more proven production from the receiver spot.
And Hunter did it at Cal. Now,
without a lot of help.
No, he did have good quarterback, though.
He did.
Because we like this guy in Bloomington.
We like him Mendoza, right? But I mean, like, around them, it was not a lot of help around those 2 guys.
But you know what's funny? Were we enamored with them in the bowl game?
No, we were not.
We weren't.
But you take.
But again, it's a bowl game.
And
sorry,
listen, you want to toss Ja'Cory Barney in there too. He's got better numbers than 3 or 4 of the guys that made this list.
That's what Big Game Hunt was saying.
So you go and you've got Raiola, who's got very similar numbers to like a Lagway and an Arch Manning and some of the guys that made this list. And then you've got the receivers, 2 or 3 of which have better numbers than the majority of the guys on the list. And I'm like, explain to me how it makes sense. That's what I have.
Yeah. Let me ask you something, B, along those lines. Because I think this is an interesting perspective. So one of our guys in the group chat, football guy, Texas guy too. So I love his objectivity because he just doesn't cram Texas down my throat. But he said, is the benefit of the doubt not given to Holgorsen because of the conference? Lots of criticism of the defenses in the Big 12 for a long time. Is it because of the conference affiliation and its degree of difficulty working against Nebraska?
There could be some of that. I honestly think as much as anything, people sort of lose sight of the situation. I really do think there's people who, Nebraska's off the radar enough that they're like, oh, they're kind of doing their own thing over there, trying to figure it out. And you'll be surprised how many people don't know the details of like Holgorsen's situation. I think outside of our area and how he came in November, there's people who
just hopping off a plane. And
yeah. I think there's a lot of people who do stuff like this, and I get it. Cause if you ask me, like, okay, do a top something nationally, top 15 something nationally. And I was chiming in on like what's exactly going on in Austin or Gainesville right now. It would be very drive-by with a lot of details missing and why I was doing that. And I think that's what happens here. Sometimes people forget, like, Holgorsen didn't get here till November. He was basically, calling plays, different language to him. And I think that's forgotten sometimes, like the challenge that they face there. And maybe there's some people who, I don't know, they might think of the conference thing that you're talking about and be like, well, let's see if he can do it in the Big Ten. But the way the leagues are so spread out now with teams everywhere, I don't even think that applies as much anymore. Like there are tougher teams, I think, to go through in the Big Ten, but Dana Holgorsen's a well-traveled coach who's seen a lot of challenges in his career. So I don't know how much I buy it if that's their viewpoint in holding off on Nebraska on a list like this. Mostly though, I think if I were to do a top 10, I would say, and I don't think it's even homer, I would put Nebraska 6 or 7 on a QB receiver list, just because I think Raiola's upside with Holgorsen. Plus, Dane Key's going to have, actually, if he's the receiver you choose, by the way, for Nebraska, he's definitely has the resume where it's already stacked up over 3 years against SEC competition, where he's put up 600, 700 type yards, as opposed to some of the other receivers on this list. He's actually got it in print, like, I did this. So that's why it doesn't make sense to me that he wouldn't be in the top 10.
As Ravi would say very angrily, and I might add, he's never been bad at this. He's never been bad at this.
He's always been good at calling plays and getting, like, always. His entire life. He's been good at calling plays and scoring points.
Are you traumatized at the voice?
I mean, it was a little high. So
you guys don't have to get me fired up about Holgorsen's. Like, I just want to say this. I remember in December when it was one of those days where it felt like crap was hitting the fan and people were probably overreacting, because I think it was the day like Tony left or T Knight left, and some players had gone in the portal. And people might remember it was a Monday night. Nebraska put out how Dana Holgorsen had signed his contract for a couple years. And I thought that, in my opinion, was the news of the day. It covered everything else that everybody was, going on about that was perceived as negative. That's how big a deal I thought it was that he was returning. It was like, okay, all this other stuff we've talked about all afternoon, these 5 or 6 things, kind of washed away in my mind, because I think the biggest news just came that he's around for a while.
So I just want to give context. So I was counting up while we were talking here. There are 5 receivers on the top 10 list that have equal or worse numbers than at least 2 and sometimes 3 of Nebraska's top wide receivers.
My man, Rico Suave.
And then there are 5 quarterbacks also that have equal or worse numbers.
For those that aren't listening or watching as they're listening, those 5 receivers are
Barian Brown.
Yep.
Ryan Wingo.
Correct.
Eugene Wilson. Deion Burks. Cam Coleman.
Yeah.
And the quarterbacks are Julian Sayin, Arch Manning, Ty Simpson, DJ Lagway, and Jackson Arnold. I didn't even throw John Mateer in there. I've got other questions about, because he's actually produced at a college level. Like, these guys, I'm not even like stretching this with these guys. These are hard numbers that I'm not wondering about, they didn't play together, they didn't have the same situation, whatever. I'm just going on hard numbers where there are 5 guys on this list who, on each side of the battery, that did not perform as well as Nebraska's guys. And we're sitting here and be like, oh, they're definitely going to be better. And then you're going to tell me that you like their offensive coordinator better than some of these situations? I'm not buying it.
BC,
I'm not buying it.
BC, let me ask you something, because you and I have talked about this. I always ask you about the vibe and being at pressers and what's the room feel like, and Coach Rule and some of the staff's delivery. And I'm like, they've been all business. Let's just play football. Can't wait to get to the games. Troy Dannon, right? I'm over settlement agreements and revenue sharing. I want to get to Kansas City and Cincinnati. How much of this do you think Nebraska just wants to play so much football right now because they actually kind of embrace, we call it disrespect, right? Because that's kind of what we do. They just want to get down to the brass tacks, because I think they're going to embrace people. I think they like the fact they think they're flying under the radar.
Yeah, it's kind of nice. It gives you a little chip on your shoulder. You get that
feel?
Yeah, and it works sort of in a couple respects. It works like as a team that's flying under the radar, and I understand why they are. By the way, like
clearly they haven't.
But a quarterback. I think when we're talking about lists like this, I think Raiola's flying under the radar for the most part this offseason. Whereas
it's actually nice for once.
Yeah, and
versus people saying it's off-season hype.
Yeah, there's a lot. We have people in our network, I know, and at other teams and stuff, and it hasn't been wrong sometimes. They're like, oh, there's Nebraska. They always win the offseason. And I've seen that chimed in once or twice this offseason, and I've thought to myself, not really this year. I wouldn't say this is an offseason where Nebraska's getting, this or that handed to them in some list or talked about just because of something that happened 20 years ago. And I think, like that can be a beneficial thing. It's like, just quietly go about your work this summer, build up that team bond. Raiola, I know, is putting in work with some of the top guys that he's going to be throwing to. They've put in the extra time. You hope that pays off. You hope they kind of feed off each other. Dane Key would be the guy put on the list, but I'm as excited as anybody about Isaiah Hunter. And I think also that Ja'Cory, and Ja'Cory, I think, had a good offseason away that because we've talked here at least about Key and Hunter more, that it's allowed Ja'Cory to not deal with what sometimes happens in Nebraska, where he had a good freshman year, but we make it more than it should be. I don't think that's happened with him. And so he can just so I think on all these different levels, like you can talk about individuals and team wise, it hasn't been over the top with stuff about what's going to happen. I don't think locally or definitely nationally. And you just hope that's useful now.
Yeah, even the more I'm kind of going through this, and I love the level of I like the passion, right? But I still know at the end of the day, you got to go and play ball. But there's nothing like being driven in the off season. Whether it's coming off a loss or a bad bowl game, or you're going to be the hunted or whatever. I do know that off-season focus 100% matters in September, October, November. So I don't want to ever be dismissive of what motivates you in the off-season, because I know whatever it is that you believe is probably true. Right?
Yeah.
If you don't think you're going to be very good, you're probably going to be right. If you do think you got a chance to be good, you got a better chance of being right than if you don't. So I kind of like how this offseason has gone with Nebraska. Even the little things, BC, like, okay, fine, Dylan. Last year you tried to get some guys together. Not everybody showed up.
Mm-hmm.
How about this year you see if you can get everybody to show up? Or, hey, Emmett, you still only had one touchdown last year. How about if you want those 17 to 23 carries, how about you get yourself ready physically? Or, hey, O-line, or hey, D-line. He didn't call them out, but the gauntlet was thrown down. Hey, guys, we were pretty good last year. Some guys that flew under the radar in terms of their production. We'll see if we can get there this year.
Yeah.
Just little things like that as a player. I'm like, okay, I see what you're doing.
If you go through the position groups, everybody on the roster, I think, has a real driving point too. Like you mentioned, Emmett. Like Emmett, I think, knows that there's that talk out there. Like, okay, he's a good back. Can he be a great back? Can you be a back that, as Rule talked about all of last year, takes those 10 or 15-yard plays and makes that last guy miss, and it's a 55-yard house call? You can go to the offensive line. And I think we know a lot of how that's going to line up, but there's like 3 or 4 veterans and 2 spaces sort of open coming out of spring. I guess you'd say left guard, right tackle. We might have some idea how that's going to fill in, but there's guys that really have to have their elbows out to compete to make sure they're in that rotation. You go to the defensive line, you're going to find a bunch of guys who have heard all offseason about, okay, Ty's gone, Nash is gone, Jamari's gone. What do you do with that? How are you going to fill their shoes? Can you be the same? So I think you can go through the roster, and like we're talking about like the national stuff and how Nebraska is perceived and all that. But even if you pinpoint on this team at each spot, you're going to find, I think, something. There's a carrot in front of it, guys. It can be very useful this offseason. That's maybe more obvious in some spots than it is in previous off seasons to me.
We're talking with Brian Christopherson of Husker247. BC, I wanted to switch gears here, talking about winning the offseason. Apparently, that's what we do here. I always
don't be that dude.
No, I always argue it's better than the alternative. That's all I'm going to say. But speaking of winning the offseason, Nebraska got a commit yesterday in the 2026 class, Rex Waterman, offensive tackle. I guess, what do we know about Rex? Was this kind of in the works for a while, as far as you're aware, or how did this come to be?
I don't know as much about Rex as some of the other guys, honestly, because I haven't written about him as much as others in our network. But I knew coming out of the weekend, because there was sort of this, I guess, angst about like, okay, when are guys going to start raising their hand in this class? And so I think it was a big deal, because I had heard Sunday like, okay, Rex is probably in, and I just thought if they needed to pop, like have someone put their hand up like he did, get the ball rolling, and I really think from this weekend there's a foundation and that is set, that is legit, like that you can stand on. Like there's a few guys I think that can commit, that visited as official visitors. And then just as exciting to me, I've kind of been locked in, honestly, on doing a lot of the 27, 28 guys that were in town for the event. And it's unreal, like the talent that was here. Like, so we're talking like all like top 50, top 75 guys. The way this worked together with the different things and how they connected, to get guys who normally wouldn't have seen Nebraska maybe at this point in their careers, and actually get them here and be like, okay, their facilities are, tops in the country. I had 3 top 65 DBs that I was talking to, that are probably going to be playing in the NFL one day, and they're saying that nobody can match Nebraska with like the facilities and this stuff. It's just like people don't understand until they get here. And so that's a big deal that you planted that seed in their mind. And we say this every offseason too. Like, what happens if Nebraska gets 9-10 wins or more? Like, what does that do to recruiting? Well, I think you could say that idea is like on steroids to me right now with the 27 guys.
When you put it together with the culture that they're building, like that's the key. These guys are talking about things that you can't even. I get the facilities thing, but Jess asked me this question last night on Husker Sports 9. It was a good, like the way she framed it. It was with regards to Trey Taylor and the 7-on-7 deal, and I said the thing that we're kind of missing with 7-on-7 in general is not only do you not get folks to give up some of their concessions and have it be a camp and combo it with the whole recruiting weekend, like, and run it the way Nebraska did, you don't get those kinds of people on your campus as the host site across the country that easily. And so to hear, I'm like, if the facilities, they look fantastic, that's great. Lincoln may be a different city than they thought. That's great. But the cool thing is when you get the vibe with the coaches, like they act like a top 15 program when they're courting you. It's like, hey, it's not only what we can do for you, like what you guys can do for us. And the players are kind of vibing with that. And they're just pups, right? I don't know. I think it's already a success, BC, based on exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we understand.
Yeah. I had probably 3 guys say unsolicited, they work hard there. Like he was talking about like the staff and everything. He's like, it stuck out to them, like the level of work that they put into it. And also, the family feel. Real quick on the facilities, I know around here it's so cliche because like every guy, like, yeah, that's what they're supposed to say. The facilities are awesome. So it's become like something you just sort of like, wave your hand at, like big deal. But I will say, like, we had a few of our national guys like Tom Loy and Andrew Ivins in for the event. And if you've never been here and actually seen it, like them and some of these kids, it does just knock them over. Like, man, this is something else. But you're right. You combine that with like, okay, this is a place where they're putting in the work, and I expect that they're going to be a powerhouse. That's what some of the guys were telling me, like Cameron Wilson, who obviously Nebraska would like to get. That was his quote to me. He's like, Nebraska is going to be a powerhouse. That's what he thought leaving there. And so I think they kind of put that in people's mind. Like, this isn't a, like, we're trying to get there type of program vibe. It's we are going to act like we are there. We're going to present ourselves just like Ohio State or just like those other schools. And I think guys recognize that.
That's our guy, Brian Christopherson, Husker247. BC, appreciate the time as always. Appreciate you dealing with my rantings. And
let me ask you one more.
Yeah.
Let me ask you one more question, B. With regards to Hudson and the offer that Hoiberg extends, and we know he's a tandem guy or a tandem. like bikes, dual dual sport guy. Um, how interesting is it when you watch him? And I probably said it like a football junkie, and people are like, "What an idiot." My thing with Ahmad and guys like that is when you watch him move, and then you look at his rating, you're probably like, and I think he even alluded to it, where some people don't think he's this, or some people don't think he's that, or he's not explosive enough or fast enough, and I was telling Ravi, when you watch him up close, you see every bit of probably what he's capable of, but to the naked eye may not be like, ooh, showstopper, which sounds weird to say about a guy that's that highly sought after. Do you kind of understand what I'm saying when you watch him move in space and kind of
Yeah, like he's an impressive looking kid, but I know what you're saying. Once they actually started playing ball, it was like a whole different thing. It was like, yeah, I mean it was there's a bunch of 4-star DBs trying to cover him. And it was like 50-50 balls were like 95-5 balls to him. Like that's where it separated. And I mean that's invaluable to have the quarterback commit. That's worth 500 social media posts. Like we make such a big deal about Trey Taylor on there, and I respect that. But throwing the ball to Ahmad Hudson down there and showing his trust, like, hey, go get it, big fella. Let's do this in this stadium a couple years from now. Huge.
I like the fact that when you actually get to see guys in front of you, because sometimes we do thumb our nose up a little bit at 7-on-7, but that's a really good example of seeing somebody in front of you that's probably different than if you're just watching him any other time, right? I think that's where the proximity of being close to him actually adds value with having that guy on campus participating.
Yeah, it was legitimate, like where you could see like this guy should definitely be a top 10, 15 player in the country. Like, I mean, it was so obvious through that. And Trey did a nice job. It wasn't just because he's forcing it because, hey, this is the guy I'm trying to recruit. It's just like this guy's going to catch everything I put up there. And I thought Trey looked really good too. I mean, I thought he did really well with what he was being asked. One thing, I mean, Ahmad Hudson didn't know he was going to play in that and had never done the 7-on-7 events till like an hour and a half before that started. And Trey Taylor was like 3 to 4 hours before when he found out he had a team to do it. I know they were with the Raw squad out of Miami that's sort of known and they're loaded up. But still, I mean, that's pretty impressive to just like go out there and work through it and look like you've been with that team for like a year or two when you've been with them for 2 hours.
I was afraid to say this comp because I don't want people, sometimes we can't understand or digest, but it reminded me similarly. Do you remember Micah Parsons coming out late?
Oh yeah,
during Friday Night Lights after being asleep for a couple hours and
yeah,
kind of jogs to get loose and then just electrifies that place on a humbug. And now that you know his personality and you listen to his press conferences and you watch him in Dallas, you're like, he's exactly that guy. He was asleep an hour before they started.
Yeah, that checks out.
He by the way the event and was still pretty doggone good. That's what it kind of reminded me of. Like, oh, okay, I'll come out here and do this.
I know you guys got to get to break, but
we don't have any things.
There's two events I had always like when we talked about Friday Night Lights or those Friday night June recruiting events. Micah Parsons and the first time Dylan showed up at age 15 and he just threw a rope. Those two stuck out. I would put if it works out recruiting wise with some of these guys like an Ahmad Hudson, it goes to the top of the list. What they were able to do in the stadium with some fans there, that would top the other things to me as far as Friday night June events. That's how significant it can be. We'll see, and that's why it's such a big deal. Like they have the groundwork set. These guys are really interested in Nebraska right now. Obviously, the Huskers want a good season for the reasons we all understand right in front of us. But beyond that, if you put together 2-3 more wins this year with those guys who just visited, that's a nice cocktail.
That's our guy, Brian Christopherson, Husker247, BC. Appreciate the time as always. We'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
Got it.